Thank you very much, Chair. I'm delighted to bring this paper to you. It's our very first paper we've had around the intent of patient and public voice to be much stronger, much more overt, and much more across the whole of the organisation than we've previously had. We've got several of our directorates and a whole work programmes that have involved patients and the public, but it's not as consistent, it's not across all of them, and it's not necessarily in the depth that we want it to be in the future. I'm delighted we've got patient stories on some of our collaboratives, we've involved carers, UK and our retention collaborative. We know that when we've been doing the end of life and the Falls collaborative, trusts have got patients co-designing that. There's some fabulous work that is being done. But what we want to make sure we're going forward with this public statement is that it's in everything. So when we're looking at approving mergers and acquisitions, has the patient voice been taken into account on that? When we're looking at some of our capital bids, have we heard the patient voice in how service changes are going to happen as a result of that? Those are the type of things that we want to make sure is absolutely embedded in all that we do. The reason for bringing it to this board is that I want to make sure that we as a whole board are behind this. It's not just something as seen as something nursing or something clinical. It's absolutely across all of our responsibilities. And the other thing I wanted to make sure it was in public was because we are making a public intention, making a public statement about our ambition, our policy, and where we want to go forward. Now, I'm very lucky to have two people in the audience today that have been working on this with me, and I know that we'll be able to do this. And the other reason for having this here is because we're doing this jointly with NHS England. Ashfa is already working in NHS England as a joint appointment across both of our teams. Neil Churchill, the Director of Patient Experience in NHS England, and Julia and I work extremely closely together with regular liaison. So what I'm wanting this board to do, I'm asking you to get behind this, and not just in paper, but in spirit and passion as well. I'm asking you to hold me to account on a regular basis so that we're able to measure the impact that we're having on hearing and involving patients and the public in all that we do. I think I'll stop there, Chair, and very happy, open to questions.
It's a really great initiative, and I
applaud it. It's, in a way, it's sad that it should be necessary, but I'm afraid it probably is. My only piece of advice on the way is just make sure we don't end up creating bureaucracy. Let's make sure it's meaningful as opposed to yet another bureaucratic exercise. The NHS is very good at taking good intentions and turning them into horrible tick box exercises. Let's make sure we don't do that.
Yes, thank you. Cathy, you wanted to?
Yes, so I do absolutely support it. I think, as Ruth has pointed out, there are parts of our organisation, for example, the patient safety team, who already have, a very good way with involving patients and the public. But I think one of the reasons it's really important that we do this and then we build on it, that it's been quite difficult, is that I think it genuinely is quite difficult in a national body. It's very different if you're in a trust. You automatically have constituents who are coming to your organisation who are members of the public and patients. So you've kind of got something. So I think that this is really good, the fact that we've been able to overcome some of those challenges. And you'll be able to build on this with our support, Ruth. So I think that's really good, but it is quite challenging at national bodies.
Richard?
I just might add, and I'm very much in favour of this, but I'd just pick on one point you said, Ruth, about this not just being a matter for you and Cathy, frankly. And I think the challenge I put in is, how do you really make this work in operational productivity, regulation and finance? So how do you get the people that maybe are not naturally going to be thinking that way, to think that way? So what I'd like to do is how do we make, without picking on individuals, but sort of nursing and medical area, there's a sort of automatic instinct almost to do it. Maybe in operational productivity, regulation and finance there isn't that. So how do we make it work there?
Well, perhaps I'll ask Stephen to answer that. Putting you on the spot. No, genuinely.
Quite right, Ruth.
Genuinely, it is, it's much more difficult. I accept, Kathy and I've worked with patients all of our careers. It is the main focus of what we do, but equally it's the main focus of this board too, in how we serve patients. We plan to work with individual teams, individual directors, and to be that supportive colleague, as well as that critical friend as well, to point out the contributions, and we will be working to support all of our colleagues to do this.
Sarah?
So just to come up with a first concrete example, we will have patient stories at the Quality Committee next month, and also you and I are interviewing
we are.
next month to have a patient representative on the Quality Committee,
Excellent.
which has been done with the help of Ashford and the NHSI
Excellent.
team as well.
Great.
And I'd love us to think about how we can bring patient stories to the board as well. I had
It's
a
really
really
powerful.
interesting conversation with Tom Grimes yesterday. He heads up, those of you who don't know, heads up our complaints management. We don't get very many, but for each individual patient, doesn't matter how many others there are, about 500 patient-related complaints that come to us each year. And all my experience of customer service is, my goodness, you must have had to get really fed up, have lost all hope of resolution to come to the national regulator or oversight body rather than the organisation that you were receiving care from. And so I think there's probably quite a lot that we could learn from analysing that and feeling it as well, which is why I think there's value in thinking about, it's brilliant the Quality Committee are doing it, but I think all of us probably need to touch it in some way. So
Definitely.
I'm going to start reading them each week as they come in, and I've given Tom the challenge of how can he bring that to life, to sort of to listen rather than necessarily to directly act, but to listen as a board to try and shape the way our organisation focuses.
I see us moving to a listening and understanding before we necessarily act.
Yes, exactly.
And that's really important, the patient voice in that.
Yeah, exactly. So
Can I, so in response to Richard's challenge, one of the things I would say is, so as you know, the NHS finance profession, we are part of the NHS. And really within the finance profession, definitely within NHSI, there's something that I actively encourage, and I don't have to do too hard, actually, is to get out there. And the more opportunities, quite easy to sit in the office and forget what we're doing. But for example, the capital teams, as they're signing off business cases, and then we try to attend some of the topping out ceremonies and start to see these buildings that are working. It just brings your job to life and gives it a bit more sense of meaning. It's always been really important to me working in health for this very reason, to start to see the impact I have, and it's not always easy. And the other thing that we do, which is only a small thing, but as we do initiatives, we convert it into what it would mean in terms of patient care. So if we make a saving, we say that's 5,000 hips or knees, and we start to just bring it to life. So just in response, but I would like to have more access to get more patient stories, because that in particular brings it to life.
yes. But the other, I hesitate to say this, but I think the other thing that Ruth and I are trying to work on is how we live up to my public commitment for the 70th birthday anniversary, which is not just for me to volunteer, but to find a way for everyone in NHS Improvement to volunteer, because I think actually taking our
really
people right to the front line will not only mean that we can do our jobs better, but actually it's the most energising and fulfilling thing you can do.
Yeah.
And I think it'll have a huge impact on our own staff morale as well. So,
It's how we do that. We're not a burden.
well,
so sometimes
that we could actually genuinely volunteer
yeah.
to help.
And
So that's why
support,
we're trying to work out how to do
Yes.
that in a
Yeah.
structured way.
yeah.
That's the challenge I've set myself, and Ruth is
Lovely.
helping me.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.